Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the owner and founder of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and this is a channel where we provide free personal development tips and tools for your subconscious mind. So today I want to talk a little bit about how to spot somebody's attachment style in the early stages. This is a question I get asked a lot, and obviously your attachment style has a profound role on your romantic relationships. And just like when we're young children, sort of babies or infants, from 0 to 2 years old, we're almost like in the honeymoon phase of our relationship with our parents. Like our parents are super loving and unconditional, and it's really before like classical conditioning starts, the punishment reward system of being socialized starts around the age of 2, where it starts really like taking precedence and happening sort of full throttle, which is part of why we have like the terrible twos, because it's a young baby's or infant's first experiences of love feeling conditional. They create their own little bits of trauma that get stored in the nervous system, and then there starts to be different uproars because there's pain that's being passed along. And just like we have that 0 to 2 years old of that young baby or child can do no wrong, and then right around 2, classical conditioning starts, and we go through that and we start highlighting the negatives and seeing them and focusing on them, and we're made to feel them. We actually carry that same patterning into our adult romantic relationships, because to some degree our adult romantic relationships are more or less used to replace our caregiver relationships. So it's interesting because you'll see like 0 to 2 years old is the honeymoon phase for adults and can't do any wrong. And then all of a sudden it's like the socialization begins. Like, you're not fitting my perspective of how you should be, and I'm going to start training you and trying to train you, and the power struggle starts and all these interesting things come up. So it's something interesting to keep note of. So we won't really see somebody's attachment style right away per se, because it's difficult to tell at the beginning, like in dating and in the early stages. However, there are signposts and there are little things that you can pick up on. Now, I would avoid ever seeing, one of the things, for example, that I'll share with you is like the dismissive avoidant can be a little bit slower to warm up and can be, a little more private. You don't want to just see something happen once and make an assumption too quickly. You want to really look for like consistency in patterns or trends that you're seeing in an individual as you're getting to know them, so that, by the 3rd or 4th date, you start to really, get a clear picture of what their attachment style is, and you're not just making assumptions. Because it's also possible, for example, that you have a fearful avoidant or a secure attachment style or an anxious attachment style, and they are, they felt triggered by something you said or did, or they are in a situation where they're uncomfortable, so they seem a little more private or closed down or shut off. And we don't want to just make an assumption like, oh, they're slow to warm up, they must be a dismissive avoidant. So we want to be patient and really look for patterns before we make assumptions. So I'm going to share with you some of the patterns that you'll see most often. So first and foremost, and I'm not going to cover secure in this video, I'll do a different video about the secure attachment style, but we're just sort of looking for the other 3 in this video. So first and foremost, the anxious attachment style is usually pretty charismatic. They're the people you sort of naturally click with. They seem really warm, and this is because their nervous system is like not very good at learning how to self-soothe. They haven't really figured out that skill set very well yet. They're almost in this kind of perpetual state of self-abandonment, but they've become usually experts or masters at connecting with others as a means to get their own needs met, because they felt that they had to, rely on other people to feel soothed and connected and safe. And so the anxious attachment style, though not always, will tend to be more desirous to connect with people, more charming or charismatic, more attuned to other people's needs, more giving, more open, because this was sort of this adaptation they made. Like, if I can be really good and charming and charismatic and open and share, then I can get my needs met as well as a result of that. And the anxious attachment style too is usually hungering for the emotional bonds. Like, they'll think far out in advance about what the future could be, really early. They'll fantasize about relationships. They'll fantasize about the future of relationships. They'll think a lot about the future of a family. Like they tend to be very quick to, future plan. They can also be generally a little bit more chatty, at least more so than the dismissive avoidant. They tend to open up fairly quickly. Like they can share their feelings a little bit quickly. They tend to look for answers very quickly. They sort of cling to information. They're trying to understand what you're feeling and what you're thinking and what that means about them. And so there's sort of this intensity there. A lot of times the anxious attachment style does tend to have some kind of wound around feeling not good enough. And so that can come up, and they can either be very adept at coping with this wound by overachieving, overcompensating, overgiving, overdoing it basically in a variety of different forms. Or it can be something that they are a little more internal with and keep to themselves, and show up as sort of insecurity, but also wanting to cling and kind of latch on. And again, they're always longing for like deeper connection, more consistency of connection, certainty that you're not going to leave and not come back. And so there's a lot of that like hungering for depth, for closeness, for consistency. And, if you're starting and, to date this attachment style, they usually tend to be quite quick to respond to messages. They can play it cool and know what's, right and not right, or, according to society standards or whatever, at the beginning stages. But they tend to be a little more chatty over message, kind of seeking more consistency, more closeness, a little more, quickly. And so, yeah, you'll see some of that more so in the early stages. For the dismissive avoidance, they can actually be quite charismatic when you first meet them. But you'll see little snippets of the coldness or the withdrawing, like you'll see, or even just the dismissiveness, like maybe they tune out of conversations a little bit more frequently. They might be a little bit abrupt or blunt sometimes with their boundaries. They might be on their phone more if they're I saw a couple the other day, and they were definitely on a date. I was at a restaurant, and I could sort of tell that the woman was actually the dismissive avoidant and the man was the anxious attachment. And I sort of overheard their conversation. I shouldn't like spy on people, but I'm so interested in people and I love people. So I was sort of like, I analyzed the tables next to me, and so I was sort of listening to part of their conversation. I know that they were on a first date and getting to know each other. And, she kept taking out her phone, and then she'd kind of come back to the conversation and be like, oh, sorry, what did you say? And the poor guy was getting so offended. And I could tell, and he, eventually just started saying, oh, no, that's not what I said. And he started getting kind of snippy back, because obviously he was hurt and felt rejected. But I really don't think the woman even noticed she was doing it. Like, I just don't think she felt that she was offending anybody or thought it was a big deal, or because she was trying to connect with him otherwise. And she was, charming and charismatic enough. And so you'll see little sort of, I don't want to say inconsiderations, but little moments of like not fully being attuned would be the best word to the other person's needs. And so a little bit of coldness, or again, just dismissiveness is a good word. And the dismissive avoidant won't open up as quickly. Like they will open up a little bit if asked, but they tend to not go into detail too much about personal things. They tend to kind of deflect or avoid personal things or turn the conversation back on the other person. They can be, funny, or they can be charismatic enough to sort of do that deflection nicely, or, connect in certain ways. But you'll see, you'll almost be able to, if you pay close attention, feel a little bit of that wall up. Feel a little bit of that, wanting to sort of keep space and create space. And again, they can be a lot slower to warm up in general. They can be a little bit cold and seemingly private, especially if it's not a date. If you're just noticing this person as a friend, you'll see a little bit of coldness, or they can be, again, private. And this attachment style as well, they need a lot of that space and time. So when you're texting, or you're getting to know them, or you're trying to connect, they can be like fully available for a little bit, and then they can be, MIA and gone, or, big spaces in between responses, or a couple days in between responses, or can be sort of getting to know a person and not want to date, go on a date each week at the beginning, maybe go on dates every 2 to 3 weeks. Again, they're very slow to connect, and there's no rush for them when they're dating. Like, they're not thinking, oh my gosh, I saw them this week and I saw them last week, and if I don't see them, this next upcoming week for the third time in a row, we might lose this connection that we're building. And they're kind of like, go with the flow. If they feel like seeing the person, they will, and if they don't, they won't. And if it's meant to be, it'll happen. And so they sort of move at their own pace. And there's not as much fear there about the potential of losing the bond. If anything, there's a little more fear towards the potential of creating the bond. And then lastly, the fearful avoidant is sort of the trickiest to spot because they can appear anxious when you're getting to know them. They are, just like the anxious attachment style, hyper attuned to the other individual's needs, like really tuned in, hypersensitive. And the hypersensitivity usually for the fearful avoidant actually comes out of a coping mechanism related to like extreme trauma. Like usually they felt so much pressure and expectation and intense sort of necessity to meet other people's needs that they can be really attuned to like micro expressions, body language, tone of voice, all these different little things. They spot incongruencies and they can appear to be like hot and cold. But usually what's actually happened is it's something, they noticed some kind of incongruency and they made a story out of it. And the hot and cold transition is usually that they're warm, they're connecting, and they took offense to something, made it mean that they can't trust or they'll be rejected, or told a story and shut down. And so they're not like moody and having mood swings. They're having a lot of triggers because they come into relationships and connection with a lot of stored triggers around a variety of different things. When connecting to others. So it's sometimes you'll see a little bit of that, like a warmth, a cold, but you'll be able to tell the difference because there's a true warmth usually. Like there's a, not like sort of warmth and then not wanting to share. Usually they can be natural sharers up until a point. And again, they appear more anxious as a general rule this way. So they can be outgoing, they can share information, they can share details, but they can also be secretive at the same time. So maybe not private so much, but secretive, yes. So more so in their time apart. And again, they're hyper attuned to incongruencies. They usually have like some kind of trust or wound around betrayal, usually have some kind of trust issue or wound around betrayal. And they can be very present and then they can be very shut off. And usually you won't see it in the beginning stages because they can be quite the people pleasers for the first little while and be quite poor with their boundaries. But what you can notice is when you are getting too close or you're touching something they may not want to talk about yet, as you're sharing and getting to know each other in conversation, they can be like good at deflecting, sort of like the dismissive avoidant. They can, share, and then they can sort of deflect and really in moving, sort of another direction. So they are, again, less private, like we'll share a little bit more, especially about their feelings and, what they're thinking or different things like that. And hunger for that bond in that same way, but then still need a lot of that space. So in text messages and conversations or communication between dates, they can go MIA as well. And then they can sort of reappear and be fully present. And so you'll see like this charismatic, charming person. And then sometimes it'll be like, you'll think they're playing some mind games because they're so hot and cold, and they fluctuate a lot because they want connection and they're afraid of it at the same time. So it's really creating that kind of ambivalence. And they go through a lot of emotional turmoil, starting to date and dating and settling in. And fearful avoidants usually like have a bit of a pattern of being really, really great for the first little while of a relationship, and right around the 1.5 to 2 year mark can sort of, end relationships a lot around that time because they have a challenge in settling into the relationship, like feeling that it's safe to stay, because again, they're ambivalent all the time. So that commitment piece can be quite challenging for them. So those are some just initial patterns if you're getting to know somebody, or you're curious, or you're trying to find out somebody's attachment style, and hopefully those are useful. Again, keep in mind, don't make assumptions, look for thorough patterns that you see, because there, an anxious person can come in and just have had a really bad day and seem a little shut off and be a little slower to warm up for a few minutes, and we can make assumptions and give it meaning. So look for patterns and be consistent. Don't jump to conclusions as you're, using this information to try to understand another person. And please feel free to reach out. Like if you have any questions, You can visit www.personaldevelopmentschool.com and check out client inquiries there, or meet with a team of people that I see or that I have trained personally, and you can meet with them one-on-one. We all offer consultations online, and we have a whole bunch of webinars and classes and all kinds of really exciting stuff coming up in the next little while. So please stay connected, please ask questions, and please like, share, subscribe to this channel if you're getting a lot of value. Thank you so much.